The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and we are webcasting to you live from the Warner Center in Woodland Hills, California. This is the new home for Autism Live. It is also the home for the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters. We're thrilled to be here with you on this Wednesday morning. We've got an incredible show for you. In just a few minutes, we're going to be joined by Dr. Dorene Granpeesheh. She is going to be answering your questions live here on the show, and that's going to be a great deal of fun. We're looking forward to that. In our second hour today during Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy, as you know, if you've been watching the show, Nancy is out for a short period of time, so I'm going to be forging ahead alone. But our guest today is really an incredible gentleman. He is a senior political columnist for the National Journal. He also was a longtime White House correspondent for the AP. A brilliant journalist known throughout the world as one of the best interviewers that there is. So if you are wondering if I have a little trepidation about interviewing one of the best interviewers in the world, I'm forging ahead. And why? Because he happens to be an autism dad. He is a New York Times best-selling author with a new book out that's called Love That Boy. Of course, I'm talking about Ron Fournier. We're really excited about the fact that he's going to be joining us. And we're going to talk about his journey to take his son, who had an autism spectrum diagnosis, to visit three different presidents, and the book that arose from that. So that's I can't wait to talk to him about that. But as I said, first, we're going to be talking with Dr. Dorene Granpeesheh, answering your questions. Now, before we get started, we want to remind you that this entire show, end to end, is meant to be interactive. We want you to participate with us. So Matt is going to show you some of the different ways that you can participate with us, while I remind you that our homepage is autism-live.com. When you go there, lots of things to do. If you want to be watching the live show, all you have to do is click on the triangle that's on the computer screen. That will start the live show playing or the most recently recorded live show. To the side of all that is what we call the live feature. It's a series of white boxes. If you will put your cursor in the one that says your questions, all you have to do is type and hit enter. That's it. There's no login, there's no username, there's no credit card. It's totally free, it's totally anonymous. All you have to do is hit enter. It shows up here on our screen. Now, we do ask that you include information about where you are in the world. We're not asking for a street address. We just want to know what's the closest major city, so that if we reference resources, we'll be able to tell you what's available in your area. Having said all of that, my friends, it is time for Ask Dr. Dorene.
Dr. Dorene Granpeesheh is the
Dr. Dorene is an expert in autism. Dorene Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Dorene Granpeesheh.
Dr. Dorene Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Dorene. Ask Dr. Dorene. We're here with Dr. Dorene Granpeesheh. So excited to have you here with us this morning. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, Dr. Granpeesheh is a true expert in the field of autism. I believe the preeminent expert in this particular field, having worked in this field for multiple decades. It's more than 30 years at this point. She's treated individuals who are on the spectrum from the very earliest of ages, at first diagnosis, all the way up through, I believe, senior citizens at this point that you have treated. And that's a wonderful thing. She's got a vast array of knowledge that she comes to share with us this 1 hour a week, and it's such a joy and a treat. We're so thrilled to have you. And I always like to say, too, to remind you and everybody else that not only is she an expert in the field of autism, but she's a visionary in this field. I have been able to see up close and personal, especially in the last 5 years, how you see what's coming before we do.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, because it helps all of us to know how to be ready and to best serve the individuals who are on the spectrum that need some help and support. So we're grateful to
Thank
you
so
and
much.
for you.
Thank you very much.
And we love this opportunity to talk to you and have people write in and ask you questions. We want to remind everybody, though, that there is no expert that in this particular format could give individual specific advice. So she won't be giving you a diagnosis or giving you individual specific advice, but what she can do is help give you a piece of her valuable knowledge that she has, which you do every time you're
Thank
here.
you very much. We'll try to guide people as much as we can. We just want to caution them that we can't really give individual advice.
Yeah, but it's such an amazing thing.
Thank you.
I occasionally say this to your face, but I say this behind your back all the time, that you have a beautiful mind, and it's wonderful to take a tour of it. And I always say about you behind your back that you're the real deal. If it seems like she cares about all of our kiddos, it's because she does. And not only that, you care about the whole child and the whole family.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I have gotten to see that. I haven't said in a while, and in case we have new viewers, my child was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2.5, and we got so lucky that somebody, a wonderful parent, told us about this amazing place. And he said to me, there's this place, it's called CARD, and miracles happen there.
That's so nice.
And we came because of that. And we found our miracle. We absolutely found our
Amazing.
miracle here. And yet through all of that, of us finding our miracle, I would hear stories about the wonderful Dr. Dorene and Dr. G and Dr. Grampuchet, depending on who was talking about her. But I didn't get to meet you until we were almost done. And
It's true.
and
It's true.
I feel like that only adds to the mystique that is wonderful about you, because I think it's a great thing when someone has the talent to do something. I think it's a higher calling when they can do it and teach it to others.
Yeah, well, I've been just incredibly blessed. I was just the other day thinking of all the people who've been here for so long. I mean, you know, we all talk about how fast life goes by, you know, but when I can't even believe that there are certain people here, and quite a few of them, maybe, I don't know, 15 or so people, where we've been together for over 20 years, which is kind of a crazy thing if you think about it. And so I can go back to the very beginning and share with them just, you know, that's such an incredible bond for all of us, and I call these folks seniors at CARD, and it's just the bond of having experienced autism together from the time I was in my 20s, late 20s, and they were all in their like early 20s or teens even when they started here. And it is an amazing experience, and it's just incredible when you have a bunch of people who are very dedicated and all excited about a certain field and all learning together and all we share ideas and we share thoughts a lot, and it's been kind of like a think tank for the past 30 years, you know, just like coming together every week and saying, what do we do now? What's the next thing now? And I want all of those people to get credit, because they are, you know, the Evelyn Kungs of the world, and Hank Moore and Carolyn Breddick and all these folks who've been involved with CARD and with us as a group. Our seniors are just incredible people. They're amazing people.
Absolutely, and I do.
You had Vince on the show multiple times.
Yes.
Vince Redmond, he's another one as well, who's part of our group.
And I always like to tell parents, because I don't think I realized until I actually came here and was working in the building, how many people meet on a daily basis to talk about how to help us and help our kids. And when I found that out,
There's just so much going
I
on.
slept better.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, there's brilliant people who are working on this all the time. And most of them don't have a family member who's on the autism spectrum, but they care just as much as all of us who do.
That's right.
That
That's right.
gave me so much peace. And I said, oh, you know, and I do try to tell parents. I was on a call last night with a bunch of parents, and I said, if you guys knew how much what gets discussed is about what can we do to help these families, it would make you so happy.
Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate that. I always want to join those calls if I ever get a chance. But truthfully, there are some pretty spectacular people here.
Yes.
Just their kindness and they're just I was just thinking the other day to myself that as you know, one of our very closest core lost a family member recently and was absent for a week, and it made me realize how very much this group means to me. And they're just not just means to me personally because they're the most incredible people and I love coming to work with them every day, but also because they are just such good people at heart. Like, truthfully, everybody's willing to compromise in some way or another to help someone else. It's always just about how can we help the employees, how can we help the parents, how can we make things better in the field. It's really all about that stuff, and a lot of it is just, it's not me, it's all of them fueling the way we all think is just what's the best way to help others. And it's awesome. It's a fabulous group of people.
I agree, but I will say to you, it always comes from the top down.
Thank you very much.
And I credit you with that. You
Thank
set
you
the
so
pace,
much,
and no, thank you. But now we're going to get into questions,
Yes.
Because that's what we do. Okay, so hi Shannon, thank you always for your positive energy and amazing Dr. Dorene. How do you decide when to follow through with ABA or let it be? Oh, how many parents are going, oh yes, pull your chair up closer. When I asked my teen about his schoolwork, knowing that he didn't read all the directions of the project, he would tell me that he can handle everything and for me to stay out of his business. I pushed on to get a time commitment when we can talk about this. His response was never. And he was getting upset. ABA training taught me to follow through, and he got more upset. He did express his wanting to be independent. I want to respect his wishes and also support when he needs. This episode, I followed through and got him to commit to speak about this the next day. Then he put me on extinction. Very confused when to let it be or follow through. Thank you very much for your show. And this is from our haircut mom, aka very confused parent. But you know what? I'm right there with you. I think a lot of us are like, when do I? Because we know it's important to follow through, but when don't we?
Yeah, and and I think you might have a lot in common with haircut mom because our children change and grow and become independent and become much more capable. And I think there's no question there's a period of time, especially as a parent of a child with autism, where you have to be all on. You have to take care of everything. You have to think for the child. You have to organize them, plan for them, et cetera, et cetera. And it's the same as any other parents, right? If you have a typically developing child, you do that, but you just do it for a shorter period of time. You do it when they're very young, and as they mature, you let go and let go and let go. But for parents of a child with special needs, you hold on for a longer period of time because you have to. You're supposed to. You're more involved in their lives. You're making things happen for them. But then it becomes the line of when and how to let go becomes kind of blurry. Like you just need to learn. Okay, so it becomes harder to trust that they're going to be okay. You go through this all the time with Jam.
Yes.
I know. And it's just because he's like my son to some extent. They just are people who are, despite us thinking, how is he going to survive? They survive. And they actually survive in a very successful way. And it's just they get there in a completely different way than we would, which is kind of an interesting thing. But we would never know that if we don't let them fly.
Yeah.
Now, with Haircut Mom, and this is a perfect example, you think, let me just be the psychologist now for a minute. It's not about following through with ABA. It's about, you always follow through with ABA. You always follow through. But you have to change what you're following through with. That's the issue. It's very, very clear that you're butting heads, okay? What are you butting heads on? Why are you butting heads? From your perspective, you think the solution is for you to have a conversation with him and know how he plans to do his schoolwork. You want assurance that he's not going to fail, and you think the only way to get that assurance is by having ongoing conversation about it, by being involved in it, and by, to some extent, controlling it. Okay, that's exactly what you're butting heads with him about, because what is really important with him, for him right now, is independence, being able to make this happen himself. So he is asking for, by putting you on extinction, by avoiding this communication, always remember, what is the underlying thing he's saying? You know how we always say when kids tantrum, you have to ask yourself, if they had language, what would they say? It still goes on. It's the same thing. Even when we have language, a lot of times we don't choose the right words. Right. What is he really trying to say by saying, what did he say the first time he said, never? He said, when are we going to get to talk about this? And he said, never, and he's getting upset. But when he gets upset, what is he really saying? What he's saying is, I want to do this myself. I need to be able to do this myself. Okay, so that is the issue. He wants to be independent, and you want to control it. We're now getting closer to what the problem is. It's not about following through or not following through. There's two people who want control of one thing. Okay. So what you have to do is and it sounds to me that he's at the level where you can have a conversation about that, about what I just said, not about the homework, right, about what I just said. So what you would do is you would actually sit with him and say, it's hard for me to release control. I feel like you really want to do this on your own. It's very hard for me to understand that I should let you be on your own because I'm worried about you failing. That's maybe my issue. So what are other ways that you can assure me that you're going to be fine? What are other ways that you can show me that your homework is going to get done well and that you're reading all the instructions and all this sort of stuff? If we can agree on a bunch of stuff and you show me those things, I will completely lay off. And what are those things? So for example, I will keep getting A's and B's, whatever it is, my grades. I will come tell you about my schoolwork, or I will allow you to talk to my teacher, or I will allow you to look at my projects once they're done, or I don't know what it is, whatever it is, like end result, work result. And if these things don't happen, then I will allow you to come assist me. And sometimes, by the way, whether it's a child who's had autism or a typically developing child, it's always easy to let someone else assist, a tutor. Why? Because, and this is a good thing, he doesn't want to fail in your eyes. He doesn't want you to think any worse of him. He will open up much more to a tutor. That's like, very honestly, that's the truth, always. That's why I always tell parents, if you can, get someone else to tutor him, because it always turns into you have a different relationship with him. Your mom. Like, mom needs to also be there when he's frustrated. Mom can't be the source of frustration, you know? So having said that, it's a conversation about how you feel and how he feels, rather than about whether or not he's going to get the homework done. Once you talk about how you feel, then you can talk about things you would like to see on a regular basis that would allow you to back off. Then you really have to back off. And if he's not able to make those grades, then you have another conversation and say, okay, so you're having a hard time. I don't want to be the one to push you, but let's talk about getting a tutor, or let's talk about help. Then you can hit the topic. But otherwise, I mean, this is the same problem every parent has. And I had this exact issue with my son, and he was having a hard time with math. And I was like, okay, well, I can't deal with, like, how am I going to deal with this? Like, he just rejects when we get into this subject. He gets so emotional, because you have to realize, for our kids, they might be struggling, and they might be very well aware of the fact that they're struggling, but they feel embarrassed to talk to you about it, because for them to come to you and say, I'm struggling, it means I'm failing. It means I might come across as not intelligent to you. It's all this negative stuff that goes with it. So, you know, in the end, what I did was I actually got someone to be his tutor. They ended up, that whole relationship became a huge friendship that influenced my son's life in a million other ways and helped him grow up as a man. And it all was a fantastic thing. And in the end, he did great, you know, and he passed and got B's and so A's and did very well with math. But it's the issue of, I think, a fast solution would be really to hand over the reins to someone else who doesn't know him. And a side solution, something that you should do anyway, is have that conversation of why you are worried. Explain to him your own frailties, your own fears. You know, our kids, it helps them to know some of this stuff is our own issues. It's not about them. Because the more you push, the more you try, the more he feels incapable, or he thinks you see him as not being capable. Does that make sense?
It's great. Great sense. I feel like I need to lay down on a couch because I needed that talk too. It was wonderful. That's so helpful.
Because it's just, we get into this stuff and it's not worth it. It's not worth the battle.
Yeah.
It's not, you're not winning by getting him straight A's.
But I think so much of our identity is about, I have to make sure that I'm there for my child. And I think you hit it on the nail about we don't know when and how, you know, to fade ourselves because we're
Totally.
like so
Plus
ingrained.
also ask yourself, and Haircut Mom also ask yourself, would you prefer to have a child who feels dominated and controlled and angry at you for controlling him, who's getting straight A's,
Right.
or a child who's getting C's and is self-confident, independent, and loves you and has established a different kind of like more cordial, like friendship type relationship with you? I chose the latter, and what happened was with my son, he brought his own grades up.
Yeah.
The issue, as parents, we live and die by what they accomplish. But the truth is, when you think about success in the world, I mean, it's not dependent on what grades you're getting. You know, I had a 1.3 grade point average of my first quarter at UCLA. 1.3, that's subject to dismissal. Like, let's just be honest, you know, and I've done pretty well.
Yes.
It's like it's not necessary. It's about all the other stuff that's going on at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want you to know that I've had an opportunity now to meet Haircut Mom. We've been friends through
how
this,
nice.
but we have met now. We're going to conquer the world together, she and I.
I believe it. I believe
It's
it.
very fun. Okay, and then let us know how that goes. Okay, let's take a break. We've been going for a little while. Let's take a break, and then we're going to be back with more Ask Dr. Dorene after these messages.
Oh, is she here? I didn't know she lives here.
Well, today is the One Hope Act Today for Military Families 10K and 5K Run, Walk, and Family Fun Festival.
Thanks for coming out to support this awesome cause.
What I'm trying to accomplish here is to get more people involved, more people to be aware of autism as a disorder so that they can be more involved in this effort to help people find resources.
Pull that belly button in, get a nice balance there.
This is an incredible event. I'm very passionate about it. Autism is affecting so many kids across the United States, and I also support our military.
1, 2, 3, 4.
My name's Gunnery Sergeant Sean Tajma, working with the School of Infantry West. I'm currently running with 1st Light Armored Reconnaissance Battalion. I personally involved with this because my son Jacob has autism. I just want to say thanks to Act Today for what they're doing to help my family and other military families with autism.
Here we go, let's hear it for the 2nd Light Infantry.
Some of the main sponsors here, of course, One Hope Wine is the title sponsor.
What we do is we donate 50% of our profits back to different partner charities, one of them being Act Today that does a fantastic job.
Act Today is very dear to my heart because when my husband was deployed, they were there when we didn't know how we were going to make things happen. They give so much to the military family, and it comes at a time when you just don't know how you're going to make ends meet. So to me, it's more than just an event, and it's more than just a grant. It's a gift.
All right, you guys, have we gone over the road?
Thank you all to the teams, to the individuals that donated to this fantastic cause out here again this year. The event got larger.
People ask me why military families with autism. Why does Act Today have that as a special program? I'll tell you why. Because our military families should not have to fight two battles. One, to protect our country, and another, to get services for their children. They move so often. Every time they move, they have to start again. We owe it to them. And it just was a tremendous success. So I just want to say thanks to everybody for taking part in it.
Check this out, Marine. See all these wonderful people?
All you gotta do next year, Marine, Devil Dog, 2 for 100, sign up with me, staff or an email, and I'm gonna take you out here, do a little 5K, little PT early in the morning. After that, you can have the time of your life. After that, I might even be able to get you a letter of appreciation, maybe a little libo time. How's that sound?
Sign up for next year because this is an event that comes on and on. It's a win-win situation here.
We're here with Dr. Dorene Granpeesheh, and she is answering your questions in real time. I'm going to move on to, I just want a programming note. Every week, at least 2 people write in and say, where can I find the template for the Teaching Emotions booklet? It was one of the Smarties that we did that you guys love so much. I want to let you know that if you go to our Facebook page, and if you go to the photos part of our Facebook page, it lives there permanently now. Because we used to put it on the crawl, but then it would get moved down and you guys would have to search for it. So it is in our photos. You will see that there are a series of them, and all you have to do is save them, and you can print them and make your own emotions booklet. It's a really good project. If you don't know what I'm talking about, definitely check out our Smarty series and find the one that's the emotions booklet. It's a really great craft for you to be able to do, and we give you the templates for the whole thing on the Facebook, on the photos section of the Facebook. Okay, want to move on to what can I do when a facility of therapy treats a patient with autism unfairly?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, that's not a good situation, and I would recommend that you start by probably talking to someone there and let them know that you feel like your child or yourself you're being treated unfairly. I think it's important to be objective and describe what it is that you feel is unfair. People have different definitions of what's unfair or fair. And I think it's important to be just descriptive, objective, and say, these are the things that are happening that I don't like, and to really vocalize it with someone who's in charge there. Sometimes things happen and the person might not even be aware that something bad is happening, or they might not even be aware that you're seeing it that way, and they might be able to change things slightly or explain things better, and sometimes it helps a lot. Like, I'll just give an example, we had to discontinue having a lot of group clinics, and a lot of parents thought, okay, this is unfair. And then we explained to them that the reason we're doing this is because all of the insurance companies cut funding for group clinics, and we're still doing it enough, but it's costing us a lot, but we're still doing it enough to allow us to have some overlap with our staff, but we had to really downsize. And then they didn't think it's unfair anymore, because they understood that it's not up to us. We're being treated in a certain way by insurance companies or the laws. So I think it's important to try to get an explanation for the things that you feel are unfair. And then ultimately, if you can't come to a compromise, if you can't communicate, if they're not willing to communicate, if there's no solution, then you should probably always try to look for another site.
I think it's really hard in our community. In fact, we talked extensively last week about an article that was written by Ron Fournier, our guest in the next hour, that was written in The Atlantic, about how there's a shortfall between our national laws have made provisions for a certain amount of care, but there's been no allocation of funds to the states to make that happen, and that there's a shortfall. And he did a really riveting piece in The Atlantic about what happens as a result of that, and that sometimes autism parents get accused of battling everybody. Because sometimes you don't know, but a very real thing, he interviewed a lot of people, state officials, who said, when I don't have the money to afford to do the thing that there's laws for, I try to avoid these parents.
Absolutely, and it's so tough. I mean, thank you for bringing that up, because this is an ongoing and big issue for us. Like, there's certain things that parents perceive as being unfair, and they don't, like, some parents won't realize that either things are being done that are to the benefit of their child in some way. It might seem harder for them, but it's beneficial for their child. Or there's just no option. Everybody has to kind of compromise in some way or another. One of the things recently for us that we deal with a lot, Shannon, is the fact that we did some studies and we realized that center-based therapy is by far more effective. So we're trying very hard to educate all of our families and to tell them, look, I know it's harder for you to maybe drive to a location, but it is so much better. And we didn't see it before, and thank God we've seen it now, and we just got accepted, that publication. And it's like, you need to bring your child in. Believe me, it's for the best. But yet the parents could perceive it as being unfair, because they have to now get up a half an hour early and maybe drive to the clinic and drop off their child before they go to work or something like that. So sometimes our perceptions of what is unfair just have to be talked about.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's the key too, because sometimes you don't know friend from foe.
Right.
And there are some people who will try to block you from getting certain amounts of funding. And it makes us be on alert all the time, where we feel like everybody's against me.
That's right.
But everyone isn't.
Right.
And so absolutely communicating and asking, and then once you've communicated, if people have demonstrated to you that they can't, then that's a different conversation. Then they won't.
Right. Absolutely.
So okay, great. Want to go on to the next question. My 7-year-old son with ASD may have a comorbid physiological disorder that I would rather address sooner than later. He gets ABA, and we just started with a psychologist to help us as a family, but should I take him to a psychiatrist for a deeper intervention regarding what may be a comorbid concern?
Right. And I can't respond to that because I don't know exactly what the issue is. I feel as a psychologist, I'm a psychologist before I was a board certified behavior analyst, so, and I'm both. So to me, a lot of times it's important, it allows me, being a psychologist allows me to see psychological comorbidities that I wouldn't normally see if I was just a behavior analyst, obviously. And vice versa. As a behavior analyst, my eyes are open to how to analyze behavior in a much different way than I would even as a behavioral psychologist. So it gives me a very good ability to see both sides. And I think that if I was just a behavior analyst, which is most of the world, if I was a behavior analyst and I was treating a child who had some physiological issues, I would not be able to guide or advise. And I think it would be important probably for the child to also receive treatment from, I'm not sure what the disorder is, so I can't say whether it should be a psychologist, a psychiatrist, or another type of professional, depending on what the disorder is. So clearly, I feel there is value in that, but having said that, because I want to make sure that there's consistency in the team, for instance, some of my older children who have a lot of psychological, very, very serious issues, I mandate that the ABA supervisor and the psychologist and the psychiatrist meet at least once a month. That is very important because there has to be consistency in the overall plan for the child. Now, many of our kids are on, let's say, dietary interventions, or they have a physician who's doing quite a bit of intervention as well as what we do. It's extremely important in my mind that there be communication between the supervisor and the physician. There isn't often. Often the physicians kind of look down at ABA supervisors and don't respect them the way they should, very often. And I think as a reaction to that, ABA supervisors don't necessarily have respect for physicians. And it's a pity. And I think there should be a lot more. The fields need to join and work well together, and that hasn't happened yet. ABA supervisors have a huge impact on the child and the family. They control full time pretty much what the child is doing, and they can change the child's behavior positively or negatively. And I don't see how they can't be communicating with physicians, because medication changes behavior, dietary intervention changes behavior, everything, the family structure changes behavior. So all of that kind of whoever else you see, make sure it's consistent, make sure those people all meet together. That's the big key to it.
Wonderful. We have some follow-up on the question about the homework from both the person who wrote it in and another person. So the person who wrote in, our haircut mom, said, Dr. Dorene, glued to the screen listening to you. It's like you were there with us while my son and I were butting heads. You are spot on as usual. I've been afraid to ask him many times because of the embarrassment. Then when I can't contain anymore, it doesn't come out well. All you mentioned is exactly what I'm concerned about, confidence and trust with me as a parent. Thank you for the action plan and great solutions. I can talk to my son again. He tells me to relax all the time and not to worry. He is the more mature one. And thank you, Dr. Dorene and Shannon from the Haircut Mom. Now, somebody else wrote it and said, what's a good way to ask a high-functioning older kid about his homework without him getting defensive? Saying things like we don't trust him or that we think he is doing poorly. Thank you for your show.
That's perfect. And thank you for those questions. And thank you, Haircut Mom, for the feedback. Just love hearing that. And this is something that we all go through, and I think it's a matter of just establishing with the child what's okay. Every child will have a different level. With my daughters, it was always like, and I know this for many of my kids here at CARD, it's a different thing. It's like some kids are very willing to share all aspects because they get more reinforcement out of you knowing. It's hard to explain this. For some kids, if you as the parent are part of the whole worry with them, they feel better. And some kids, and mostly boys, don't want you to know because they don't want to look like they're failing. So I think the way to have these conversations varies, and it has a lot to do with each child's strengths and weaknesses. For me, one of the things I found worked for me with my own kids and with the kids that I treat here is making light of the whole subject. In other words, letting them know. I think it helped my kids, for instance, when they heard that I used to struggle with math, when they heard that I used to have a 1.3 GPA, when they heard all the difficulties that I had. It made them realize that if you're having difficulty at one instant, doesn't mean that you're a failure in life. I share a lot with my kids my own weaknesses, my own frailties, I suppose, because it helps them see that everyone has something that they're horrible at. I let my kids laugh at me when I do silly things or when I do something I'm not good at. Because it's important for them to see that I'm not the boss and they're the weak person. You know what I mean? It's important to establish the friendship because, hey, our kids share with their friends. Why do they share with their friends? Because they don't feel judged. Not that we're judging, we're not, but they always feel like we're judging. And it's really, really important. I think one of the things my kids all three would agree is they never feel judged by me. Because even when they tell me something, I'm like, God, I know that sucks. Like, oh my God, and as parents, we always try to find solutions. And I think when we try to find solutions, sometimes giving someone a solution means I know better than you do. So we have to kind of slow down on the giving solutions part a little bit. Sometimes I'll even, like if I know one of my kids is very sensitive to something, I'll give the solution to the sibling and say, hey, you might want to suggest that to him, or something like that, because it can't come from me. Or I'll suggest it to my husband and have him, it just can't come from me. So it's all of those things that changes the conversation. It's come down to their level a little bit more. By just telling our kids we're worried, you're bringing yourself down to that level. You're explaining to them, this has nothing to do with you. This has to do with me. This has to do with me being afraid that I wasn't a good enough mom and that's why you're struggling. That's what it has to do with. And letting them understand it's about your own stuff helps a lot.
It's amazing advice. I'm so glad we're recording this. We're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back with a question about assessments to get you ready for the annual IEP and a person who has gone through a single case denial. So we're going to come back with those questions after these messages.
I love this one. I love this one.
Hi guys, welcome back. For the month of June, I figured we'd do some cool things that are kind of like summer camp activities. So the activity we're doing this month is making a shoebox guitar. The materials you'll be needing are an old shoebox, a paper towel roll, a pencil, a stencil, rubber bands, a crayon, and an X-Acto blade, which only the adults will be using. So first things first, I have a shoebox and I painted it just so it's a little bit more interesting. This is an opportunity for your kids to decorate however they choose. They can keep it simple or do some stripes with paint, or you can always use, stickers or tape instead of paint to decorate it. All right, now that I have this, I'm gonna take my stencil, place it on top of the shoebox, and I'm gonna draw a circle somewhere in the center, okay? So now that I have that, I'm gonna take my X-Acto blade, which is why this is for the adults, and cut out the circle. Next, we're going to cut out a smaller circle at the top of our shoebox guitar. The reason we're going to do this is so that we have a place to insert our paper towel roll, aka the stem of the guitar. And I'm going to grab my paper towel roll and I'm going to trace the outside of this so I can cut a hole on the top of this too to stick this in so it just looks a lot more realistic. It won't be usable, but it'll look pretty cool. Now that it's been traced, now I'm going to cut it out with the X-Acto blade. And again, this is something that only the adults should be doing. Now that I have both of the holes cut in this, I'm going to take my guitar strings and place them on. As you can see, it's missing one thing. It's stem, so now I'm going to put this in the hole we just cut out. Alright, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my crayon and put this in. And then after that, your guitar is totally done and you're ready to rock out with your kids. And if you're really cool, you'll make another one so you and your child can play together while doing socio-dramatic play, or work on imitation skills where you play a pattern on here and then they try to repeat it. I hope you and your child had lots of fun making this. And until next time, rock on.
Can you see me flying by your side?
Welcome back to Autism Live and to Ask Dr. Dorene. We're here with Dr. Dorene Grandpichet, and she is answering your questions in real time. I promised you that we were going to there's one question that had just come in about assessments, and of course my iPad went away for a second. Here we go. Dr. Dorene, what kind of assessments should we do annually to help determine needs for the IEP? And they said, thank you.
So that's really good. Thank you for that question. The IEP is a little bit different than some other stuff. So it depends. I feel like I have too much to say about everything. So it depends on what's currently in the IEP. So for example, I could have right before we reduced working with schools about a couple of years ago when insurance came in, districts had gotten to the point where they would limit the IEP goals. I don't know if you remember, but like LAUSD, for instance, had said we will not accept more than 3 goals. And we're like, what, 3 goals?
For a year's worth of education?
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And so let's assume that's not what we're talking about. Let's assume we want an actually accurate and precise IEP. Then what I would suggest you do is the skills assessment. Now, skills is the single only developmental assessment out there in the world that has been validated and found to be reliable. No other assessment exists. We have the Vineland, which is a standardized test, but it doesn't give you specific individual goals. Skills does. Skills is the single assessment out there that has shown reliability and validity. Now this is,
and I just want to add to that a lot of times we assume that means it was valid with doctors, but the study showed it was valid with parents.
Yeah. So what
that
means is that reliability means a few different things. Reliability means that if you answer the questions on skills and then you answer them again tomorrow, they're going to be very similar. It'll still measure the same things accurately. It also means if you answer the questions and your husband answers or your wife answers the questions, you're going to be reliable with each other. So it means inter-rater agreement as well as reliability over test-retest. So that's a very important thing. Validity means it actually measures what it says it's supposed to measure. It means that when you answer a question on skills and you say, my child doesn't have the skill of, let's say, telling jokes, it's accurate. Your child really can't tell jokes, and then we know what to teach him. So it's very important to do the skills assessment and to do it regularly and to keep updating it. So the way we do that is that when a child enters CARD, we have the parents do first a brief skills assessment, which is a little bit shorter, so we don't scare anyone. And then in their first month of entry, we ask the parents to fill out the actual assessment. The actual assessment is lengthy. If your child, the higher functioning your child is, the longer it can take. I've heard that for the highest functioning child, it'll take somewhere like 20 hours. 20 hours means you're working on it every night for 2 weeks, it's a lot. But it's extremely detailed. Like it'll ask about every area of functioning of your child. Now, for an IEP, some of those areas the school district couldn't care less about because they're not going to deal with. For instance, depending again on your school district, the school may not want to deal with self-care issues. They may not care if your child needs dressing skills or toileting skills or whatever it is, because those are things they're not going to be able to teach them in school. They're not part of what they're supposed to teach. So you'll have to pick select sections. Language obviously has a lot of stuff in there, the language curriculum. When you go into the skills index, it will give you hundreds of questions across these domains, and the domains are language, social behavior, cognitive, executive functioning, let's see, play, self-help, which I think is called adaptive. What am I missing?
Social.
I said social.
You said social.
Motor,
Yes.
motor, and academic.
There we go.
And that's 8. And so please don't do just academic. You start with academic. Academic will cover things like reading comprehension, math ability, and so on, and it follows the California curriculum. But I want you to do social for sure, language for sure. If your child's very young, do play. If your child's a little bit older, do cognitive, do executive functioning. Realistically, do all of them.
Yeah.
And if you do all of them, you will end up with hundreds of goals, not 10, not 3, hundreds of goals. And then what I would suggest you do is go with the youngest age. So you'll see the earliest goals because it's age normed. So it'll show you skills that your child should be doing at, let's say, 2, at 3, at 4, at 5, and so on. It'll only go up to your child's actual age. So you will start with the youngest skills, which means the most basic skills, and those are the ones you want to make sure are being taught. Now, what we do is obviously everything we're working on is also in the child's IEP, it's in their home program, it's in their behavioral intervention plan, it's in, everywhere. And so that's how you do it. Now, skills also actually provides you language for the IEP. So it can help write the IEP for you. Once you've answered questions about what your child can and cannot do, it links to lessons to teach those skills. And the lessons each have an IEP goal. So that's how it helps you develop the IEP.
And I will just say, yes, it takes a long time to take the assessment, but I think it's one of the single greatest investments you can make in your child and your family, because I think there's a peace of mind there. When you're done with the assessment, we're always, as parents, asking, where is my child in terms of everybody else? And there's no quick answer, but what it does is it gives you a chart that lists all the different skills, and it's a bar graph, and it shows where your child ideally needs to get to for right now, and where they are. And you get to look and go, oh, well, look, they're very strong in this, but this is an area that we need to work on. You learn so much from looking at that graph.
That's so great.
It energizes you, and you go, okay, I know it helps you to prioritize.
Yeah, totally.
Like I get chills thinking about how exciting it was the first time I saw that graph. I was like, oh, this is what I've been wanting, to know exactly where we are.
Yeah, it's very cool. You know how we all kind of love doing the personality tests on ourselves, for instance, and we'll like say, oh, I'm an INFP or whatever it is. This is that for our kids in terms of skills. It like helps break down your child's overall strengths and weaknesses, and I think that's incredibly valuable because, and then the thing about, to answer the question more accurately, is that you do it, you establish an IEP, and then you do it every year. If you're a card patient, you don't have to do it every year because as your child ages, you get new questions. The questions keep coming to you, so you don't have to repeat the whole thing. But and if you're a skills user, which you could just become a skills licensed user, and it's not expensive. If you want to maintain it, it's $75 a month, and you can maintain it, and it'll keep updating, and it'll keep giving you new questions every time your child gets a little bit older, and it will then allow you to see progress, so you don't have to re-administer every year because it'll keep giving that to you. Aside from skills, just to quickly go back to this parent, the other valuable assessment that I like all of my kids to have is the Vineland. The Vineland is an adaptive behavior scale, and it's actually VABS, Vineland Adaptive Behavior Scale, and it is fantastic, and it starts at age I think 1 or 2, and it goes to 99. So your whole life you could repeatedly and it's a questionnaire, so you can fill that out and about your child, and it'll help you assess how they're growing in all areas: communication, adaptive, daily living, communication, and so on. And then the only other assessment that I think is incredibly valuable to do annually is a language test. It's very important for our kids to do a language assessment every year, because it shows areas of weakness in speech. And then finally, for our higher functioning kids, I always do a repeated social skills inventory of some type, and it changes because they get more advanced, but I always measure social skills as well.
Okay, I want to give, since I have this and I can read it, if you're interested in getting skills, you want to go to skillsforautism.com, or you can call 877-975-4559. Again, that's 877-975-4559, skillsforautism.com. And it will, once you've done the assessment, you can add the lesson that goes with it, and it gives you the IEP language. So you can go into the IEP saying, here's what we want to teach, and here's the IEP language. And I have done that in an IEP, and you want to talk change in the conversation, boy, stuff happens in a different way when you do that.
Yeah, that's
and it's
great.
lovely. It's
That's
so
great.
good. Okay, we only have just enough time to deal with this question. Dear Shannon and Dr. Dorene, thank you so much for answering my question a few weeks back. We filed grievance to our insurance to allow us for a single case agreement with CARD. Hopefully we'll get answered by next week. They did get a denial of that, and we talked on the phone yesterday about that. But in the meantime, we signed up for skills. Currently, he is getting 20 hours, and we also requested to double that. My question is, once we are approved for that, will he be at the center for 40 hours a week? If not, how does that work? Do we drop him off at the center base and then bring him home for the home base? I'm thinking how to adjust his nap time. Any tip would help. Please also, can you give me more info on a person to contact about your new school here in Los Angeles?
Sure. I mean, and if you have their information, we can certainly give them names of people to talk to for the school. But do you have any more details about why they got denied?
The denial was, according to the report, and I talked to a couple of people here, they were saying that what they were getting is fine. Is sufficient. They are, I think I can say, because we're not saying who it is, it's through Kaiser. But yet Easter Seals cannot take them, so they farmed them out to another place. The supervisor at that place believes that the child should have 40 hours, but she subsequently left that place. Yes. And so that when Kaiser reviewed it, they said, we think that 20 hours is fine and that what you're getting is fine.
Right.
And the family is saying, we think we need center-based.
Right.
We need more of an opportunity for him to do all the things that he's doing and get the opportunity to work with other kids.
Yeah.
And they just said, no, we think what he's getting is fine. So she is getting her denial, her, I've lost the word in my head.
Appeal?
Appeal, that's the word that I want.
So now she's And she's going to appeal it.
Yes.
Okay, good. That's important. And also Kaiser can, they can argue with you about hours, which we will argue back, but they can't argue with you with location. Julie should probably know about this, our public policy, because there's a law actually currently under review in California, and I think it's passing, which says insurance can't dictate the location, school, home, or center.
Okay.
Which is a big deal. And
so if you ask for center, they have to be able to provide that to you.
It's none of their business where it is. It's the provider's business where it is. That's what the issue is.
Okay.
And you don't have to ask for one or the other. They just need to give funding, and then the provider, it's kind of like, does the insurance get to select where you actually have a procedure? No, the doctor decides if your procedure is going to happen at the hospital or if it's going to happen as a surgical center or at their office. The doctor decides. It's the same thing with ABA. So if Kaiser specifically is debating the center versus home, that's something we need to know, because we will go after that.
Great.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
So I'm glad about that. Now, secondly, once we get 40 hours at the center, there's lots of stuff that happens. One is we'll find out how much he's napping, when he's napping. He can nap at the center. We will get all the stuff for him to make sure he has a quiet space if he needs to. Young kids need to nap. That's important. Otherwise, we'll work him off his nap. Around age 2.5 to 3, we start working our kids off naps. So that's not a problem. We'll do that as well. How is that work drop for that he will be at the center? So we start very early and we go very late, and we can definitely provide him with aftercare if you need time to get back from work. There's no question. We just keep working through. Like, we will keep him. He can go. We will do his schedule with you, so he has social activity during the day, so he has physical activity during the day. Our kids that are with us all day are pretty active. Like, they get a whole variety of stuff. It's not just sitting down and doing things all the time. We have playgrounds, all that sort of stuff. And then, of course, once we get information, Serenita will give you information about the school, and then we can get that going as well.
Right.
That'll be lovely.
Fabulous.
Did I answer all the questions
I think that you did, and I will make sure to get back in contact with her. But that means that we've got the chance for one more question. Trying to decide. I think I want to go to the food one. I'm about to try to begin, or is there one that you prefer?
No, I just wanted to quickly say, yes, I do have a clinic. I'm at all the clinics, but this is where I am predominantly. This is in Woodland Hills, California.
Because somebody wrote, does Dr. Dorene have a clinic? I would like to have her see my son for best advice or assess him.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to just get in touch with CARD headquarters and ask for me, and you'll go to my assistant, and she will set up a time for you.
Very cool. Okay, so I'm about to try to begin on new foods with my son for the first grade school year. I'm so scared, but he has to be able to eat a lunch that doesn't require to be heated up. Gosh, I remember when this was my panic.
Yes.
He currently only eats about 6 or 7 things, and he's 6 years old. I know 20 times is needed to present something. I love that you guys learn this. But what is the best way to start to approach this? Do I need to pull out the big reinforcements like I did with the potty? It doesn't have to be on the show, the question, but I think a lot of people can learn from this. And you gave your email, which so we won't share. Please help and thank you.
No problem. So if I get this right, you're just asking how to introduce new foods? That's the question? Okay. So first of all, just so we're not, one of the things I always suggest to parents is don't try to teach new things as you're doing them in real life. So first of all, he has 6 or 7 things that he'll eat. Let's make sure for your sanity, you do some combination of those 6 or 7 things over the next 2 weeks, so you're set. You're not worrying about the next 2 weeks, okay? And you're set, and you have a lunch for him every day. Okay, you're done with the next 2 weeks. You're not worrying about that anymore. Now we're focused on foods we can introduce. So the way you introduce foods is, there's different ways, and I'll try to give a summary about this. What you do is you take preferred foods, the things that he really likes, and those are your reinforcers. And then you have unpreferred foods, things he doesn't want to try, and those are the foods you want to increase. You basically will do one small amount of an unpreferred food, and then he gets rewarded with lots and lots of preferred food. So initially what that means is, let's say, one bite of broccoli for a whole plate of something he likes, chips or whatever it is he does eat. And then you gradually increase the broccoli and reduce the chips. And you do this over the course of, let's say, a couple of weeks, so that he gets to a point where he can handle broccoli with a very tiny amount of something he likes. Okay, so it's like like you're producing a healthy plate. Just like in a healthy plate, you'll have some chicken, some broccoli, and some, let's say, I don't know, carbs that you want.
Rice.
Then rice. Then, and let's say usually the carbs are the ones our kids love. So you'll start out with all rice and a tiny amount of broccoli and a tiny amount of chicken, and then you make those two bigger and this one less. That's kind of in a nutshell. Now, but as you do this, and then you do it with another food, and then you do it with another food, and you just keep doing that. As you do this, you have to be very careful. You have to go slow, because if he starts rejecting a food tremendously, you're going to have some problems. You're going to have to step back. There's a lot of guidelines I want to give you. One is, make sure the child is distracted somehow. So when we do this, when we start introducing new foods, we'll generally have like the TV on. And we'll turn, like the child starts watching their favorite program, you turn off the TV, and then you'll say, oh, a bite of broccoli. And if you take the bite of broccoli, you turn on the TV and you give a whole bunch of really good food, okay? So you have to have like major reinforcements in place for them for a very small demand. That's the key to it. And basically they understand the more broccoli I eat, the more I get to watch my favorite show, and I get all these other foods. And so it becomes fair. And the other thing that's important to pay attention to is usually kids will not like certain foods, not based on the same things we think. They will refuse certain foods just based on, let's say, the category. Like they'll hear, oh, it's a vegetable, and they'll think I hate all vegetables. Start with vegetables that they'll probably like carrots and peas, and then go to other vegetables. And our kids tend to have resistance because of other issues, like for instance, the texture. Texture becomes a very important thing. So pay attention to the types of textures your kid likes. Some kids just like crunchy foods. Then make sure what you're introducing, like instead of introducing cooked carrots, give him uncooked, so it's more crunchy. There's a lot of stuff like that that I could tell you. Texture becomes very important. Taste, of course, is important. Make sure things don't taste bitter or sour. And then, of course, you need to just go gradual, because this is a process. When we did food introduction, I think it took, in some very, very drastic cases, it would take even up to 75 hours of intervention for the introduction of, let's say, 1 or 2 new foods. So take your time with this.
And I want to say that the A word, which we're going to go to in just a second, documents this very well.
Right.
And even to the point of showing the video playing and stopping it for him to take his own bite of something. And the dad was like, that's not going to work. Why would you think that's going to work? I love the dad and I love the whole family in the A word, but the dad is like, really, are you kidding me? This is what we've been working towards. Like, that's never going to work.
Right.
And then it works. And then he's mad. He's like, well, if it worked, why didn't we do it a long time ago? Because it had to be worked up to. In any case, we're out of time, but try that. Let us know. It's an adventure. It will be okay. Thank you so much.
Such a pleasure.
We are not here in any shape, form next week. You're not here. I'm not here.
Yes.
But we will. We have the rest of the show today, and then we have a show next Thursday, which I'm going to talk to you guys about in just a second. But we want to thank Dr. Granpeesheh. Don't go away, because in the next hour we have a very special guest, Ron Fournier. He is the incredible best-selling author of the book Love That Boy. So we're looking forward to having him join us here. But first, we're going to see a little bit of The A Word, that wonderful documentary that shows the arc of intervention with a little boy named Jack Riley. Stay tuned, watch this, and back with Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy after The A Word.
Hey, Zach Riley. Hi. Hi. Can you wave? You're waving. Hi. Hi. Good job.
Hi, is anyone there? Hello? Hi, is anyone there?
Front of the line.
Oh, oh, I hear you. Really quickly. And I went away.
Thank you. I'll do what I. Okay, fabulous. Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, yes. I was like wondering what was going on. Can you hear me? Oh boy. Hello?
Hey, Zach Riley. Hi. Hi. Can you wave? You're waving. Hi. Hi. Good job.
You say howdy, we say hi. Let's get rowdy, let's get.
Hey, Zach Riley. Hi. Hi. Can you wave? You're waving. Hi. Hi. Good job.
You say howdy, we say hi. Let's get.
Hey, Zach Riley. Hi. Hi. Can you wave? You're waving. Hi. Hi. Good job. Hey, Zach Riley. Hi. Hi. Can you wave? You're waving. Hi. Hi. Good job. What is this? Is it a toy? Toy. Toy. Good talking. Wow. Should we open? Horse. It is a horse. Do you want to open it? Horse. Yeah, it is a horse. Do you want to open? Open. Wow. So you have 1, 2. You have 2 pieces. Do you want more? No. Okay, here. You want another horse? I have another horse for you. The horse. It's a horse. Here you go. You say, I want more. Yeah, more.
Now that Jack Riley is talking, Jessica is trying to build his vocabulary by having him say short phrases instead of one-word demands.
Say, I want more. Say, I want more. Say, want more. Good trying. All done or you want more? More. Okay. All right, should we put it away? No. You want more? More. Okay.
He has mastered the use of that word.
Yeah. I swear, like today he's like a different kid, and I saw him just Tuesday. That's amazing.
We went to a restaurant last night. He ate his own food, but he fed himself in the restaurant.
Good. What did you guys bring your own food?
Yeah, we bring our own food with
for him.
He did great.
Will he try any of the foods that you have?
Well, we have to be careful because of the gluten encasing thing. So we don't let him actually if it's a normal restaurant.
Okay.
Although the place we went has gluten-free pizza.
Oh, that's
So
pretty
we're
cool.
gonna try that next time maybe.
It's really good. Because as soon as you guys have him tested and everything, maybe we might want to try new foods with him.
Okay.
Introduce him to new foods. That would be good.
Right.
Okay, all right, 1 minute's up. All done. We can play with it later, okay? Clean up. Clean up. Oh, good listening.
It's a pretty cover, isn't
It
it?
is.
What happened was my wife, as we're walking out of the doctor's office after Tyler, our youngest child, was diagnosed at age 12 with Asperger's syndrome, she told me, you got to step up. You got to spend more time with him, and you got to get out in the world with him, because these things that we had thought were uncomfortable to him, like shaking hands and looking people in the eyes and knowing when he's losing people's attention, having a conversation, we just learned were actually unnatural to him because of this thing that we had never heard of, Asperger's syndrome, and barely knew much about the autism spectrum. So literally in the car on the way home, she concocted this idea that I would take him to presidential sites and libraries, because Tyler's obsession at the time, among other things like animals, was social science and history. And the presidency is what kept me away from the family so much and away from him. So Lori said, the job that kept you away from us so much, you're now going to use to help Tyler. He needs to know that he's loved and you're there for him. So off we went. We went first to the White House, coincidentally, and then to Sagamore Hill, Teddy Roosevelt's home, and that's Tyler's favorite president, and the Ford Library and JFK Library and John Q. and John Adams estates. And I thought it was all done, and I thought I got a better understanding of who he was and how he was wired and how I was not being a very good dad to him, how I was not meeting him where he was. And I thought I checked the box, and Lori said, okay, now go see if President Clinton and President Bush will meet with him. Wouldn't that be amazing if he could have that experience and that challenge? And I told her, you got to be kidding me. Haven't you read what I've written about them? They're not going to do a favor for me. But they did, to their credit. And it says something about public service. And they both were so gracious. And I wrote a magazine article on it. Lori wanted something that Tyler would tangibly be able to look at and remember how much we cared for him and loved him. And then she wanted me to write a book. So she's pretty much been my editor and pushing me along the way from the beginning.
Well, and she sounds like an amazing woman. I gotta say, as I was reading the book, I loved how wonderfully you talked about your wife, all the nice things that you said behind her back, about what a great parent she was and how she helped you to be able to find this closeness with your son. I was very impressed with the whole family. It sounds like you guys have a very tight-knit family that deals in honesty, and that was conveyed in the book. And I think it's a great read for any autism parent, but particularly I think it's a great read for autism moms to get the dad perspective. Honestly, I know when I talk to moms and in groups, because I'm an autism mom, we talk about guilt and how much guilt we have. And I don't think it ever crossed my mind that the dads have anywhere near the amount of guilt that we have. But you have convinced me, Ron, and it has sparked a conversation with my husband about how much guilt he has about different things. I thought that was just the moms, so you have really enlightened me. You even referred to some of the trips as guilt trips, which I thought was really funny.
I realized right away. Actually, when he was diagnosed, I realized what a heel I was, because the doctor was going through all the symptoms or attributes of autism, of Asperger's syndrome. And she said, one of them, Tyler has a hard time. He's not flexible with his hands and his feet. He's clumsy. And I said, well, is that why he's not good at sports, doctor? And she looked at Lori with kind of a disapproving glance and said, well, yeah, it's also probably why he doesn't like playing sports. And at that point, I was still pushing my son into sports because I thought that was the best way to bond, because that's how I bond with my father. So that was the first lesson that I learned in this journey. But I'm glad you mentioned honesty in my family. My wife was always very honest, and Tyler, all of our Aspie boys and girls are wired in a way where they're incredibly honest, bluntly so. But I wasn't. I was never very honest with myself, and I've come to realize that it took the book for me to really open up and look inside myself and at least be self-aware. And now I'm realizing a couple of interesting things are happening with the book. I'm having a lot of women coming up to me and saying, will you sign this to my husband? He needs to step up like you did, you big goof. That's great. And I kind of expected that, but what I didn't expect is all the dads who are kind of seeing the book and in events that I'm doing around the book as a way to open up a little bit, because I'm starting to realize that we're kind of it's inbred in men to either fight or flight in our DNA, and when we can't fight something, when we can't fix something, and autism is not something we can fix like a sink or a carburetor, then we tend to flee. And I didn't leave my family, but I was kind of checked out of the family when things got tough, and a lot of guys do that. And I can tell you, if you've got time, I'll tell you one example of a guy who
absolutely. We've got time. Talk to us.
Well, I gave this speech to a school in Baltimore right after the book was published in April. And it was a 45-minute speech about the book. And the whole time I'm noticing this guy in the front row, about my age, well-built, big guy, looking at me with like no look on his face. And I know from experience that usually means somebody is upset at me. He's looking at me very sternly. And I'm thinking he must be a Trump supporter or a Hillary Clinton supporter, somebody whose candidate I ticked off, and he's going to lay into me about politics. So when I said, okay, I opened it up for questions, he raised his hand. I figured, well, I'm going to run right to it. Let's get him out of the way so then we can go back to talking about the book. So I called on him. And again, with his stern-looking face, he said, I'm going to be taking a road trip this summer with my son. I said, oh, that's great, sir. I hope you get half as much out of it as I did, and you know, good for you. And it was almost without even acknowledging me, he finished his sentence and said, I don't know what to say to him. I don't know what to say to him. And the room got real quiet. And he was in front of a bunch of other, moms and dads. And I could see a guy behind him kind of shaking his head. And I realized, that's the problem with us. We don't, us guys, and I'm probably overgeneralizing, but we don't know what to say to our kids. We don't even know what to say to each other. You get 4 or 5 guys together and we're going to talk about sports, we'll talk about work, but you don't kibitz about your kids. You certainly don't admit that you're having trouble connecting with one of your kids or helping one of your kids. Moms do all that. And so therefore we kind of check out. And if the book does one thing, I hope it tells guys that, hey, set aside your guilt and don't use that as an excuse. Set aside your ignorance and your failures, because you can't be any more ignorant or more of a failure than I was. And do the simple things. Just be with your children more. Even when if you have to work a lot, when you're home, make sure you're more there than most of us are. Talk to your wife. Make sure you put your wife or your partner first, even ahead of your children, because that partnership is so important, and it's so fragile when we have special needs kids.
And I think your book is a wonderful roadmap for those parents who don't know what to say, because we get to work through it with you, how everything starts to tumble for you until you get to the big epiphanies about who your child is and who you are. I think you've really started a conversation that's evident about how much the role of fatherhood has changed. And you talk in the book about the love that you had for your father and who he was and what your relationship, and in particular, you talk so much about expectations of what you thought fatherhood was going to be and who you thought your child was going to be and who you thought you were going to be in that relationship. And none of it quite worked out the way you expected, did it?
Isn't that funny? My dad, when I started writing it, he wasn't even a figure in the book, but he got real sick and then eventually died while I was writing it. And as I was crawling inside myself, I realized how much of me was a part of him. And he ends up being a pretty big part in the book, and a hard part for me still to read. But I got a wonderful editor named Heather Jackson, and I was really struggling with the book, and she was the one who came up with the idea on the expectations and said, take every chapter should be devoted to one expectation. And at the beginning of that, and inside that chapter, delve into the expectation that you had around that theme. Talk to other parents and how they're dealing with that expectation. And what's the social science behind the expectation and the pressures that come with it. So the first chapter is we expect our kids to be normal, whatever the heck that is, right? None of our kids are normal. We expect them to be, the second chapter is we want them to all be geniuses. Next, we want them to be popular. We want them to be successful in their careers. We want them to be happy, whatever that is. So each chapter really delves into one of those expectations and kind of blows up the myths that all of us parents, and not just special needs parents, by the way, and not just dads, all of us parents bring a lot of expectations into parenthood, kind of the baggage of our childhood, and just the nature of the times. We want our kids to succeed in these crazy times, so we put all these expectations on them academically and socially and all around. And then just to make the book be a little bit easy to digest, the beginning of every chapter has about 1,000-word essay, really short essay, a couple pages, on one of the road trips. And it's a road trip that the theme kind of ties into the chapter itself. For example, Tyler and I talked about happiness at Monticello, the home of Thomas Jefferson, who of course wrote about the pursuit of happiness. So that little piece is the top of the chapter on happiness.
It's really beautiful. I have to say, it's beautifully written, and it really lets us get inside the relationship and how things unfold. I think you did a beautiful job of laying it out. I want to talk a little bit for a second about one of the things that was really stunning to me when you talk about him being diagnosed at the age of 12. And this is something we talk about on the show a lot. It doesn't matter what age a child is diagnosed. Every single parent expresses at some point about, oh, if only, what if this had happened and then maybe my child would have gotten the diagnosis earlier. And people attribute it to all kinds of things. There are parents that English isn't their first language and they say, oh, if only I understood English, maybe my child would have been diagnosed. And I'd like for you to talk a little bit about, because here you are, this incredibly articulate person who has a wonderful command of the English language. You're obviously uber intelligent, at the top of your field, access to all kinds of experts, and your child was 12, and you had some feelings about that and some guilt about maybe if you had done something different. Could you talk to our audience about that?
Yeah, with Asperger's syndrome, the earlier, in any form of autism, the earlier you can get to them, the more effective the treatment is. We waited too long, in part because we were ignorant. We didn't know a lot about autism. And he was an enchanting, precocious, brilliant, high vocabulary, funny, a little prince in our home. His two older the two older children in our family are girls. But part of it, to be honest with you, again, when I really dug into it and really thought about it, part of it was I wasn't home a lot. I was out with doing this ego-stroking career, chasing presidents around the country and around the world. And often those little decisions you have to make, or you do make, when I had an option, I more often than not took work over family. So I left my wife home alone with 3 kids and a lot on her plate, and we missed it. The other reason, and this is an important one I think a lot of people relate to, is I think we were afraid to admit that he might be different. I think we were afraid of any kind of label. I think we were kind of hoping that, okay, this is something he'll grow out of. Because fundamentally, and again, I got into the social science behind this in the book, we're afraid of our children not being like us. There's something in our DNA that we think that the way we have immortality is by creating a carbon copy of ourselves. It's the easiest thing to raise as somebody like you, and it also kind of feeds into our primal need to leave something behind. So when we get a stranger, when we get a child who's nothing like us or nothing like what we expected, most of us, certainly I did, kind of freak out or check out. So that's the 2 big things I attributed to personally, was a lack of time, a lack of knowledge, and a fear of raising somebody who wasn't exactly like me.
But I hope that you've had an opportunity to talk to enough autism parents to know how common that is and to forgive yourself for that, because it's just as likely that you could have been at home and still the diagnosis may not have come until he was 12. I hope that enough autism parents have told you their stories so that you know that you're not alone in that.
It's funny, some people who I've talked to and spoken in front of since I did an essay on this 3 years ago tell me they can see the difference in me. When I first wrote this and first was dealing with this, I was wearing my guilt on my sleeve. I've come to accept not just Tyler, but also my mistakes, to your point. It really helped me to write this, to be honest with myself, to kind of open up a vein and admit that I'm not perfect, and then to accept that I'm not perfect. And maybe that's the first thing parents have to do, is first accept that we're not perfect, and then maybe we can accept the fact that our kids aren't perfect and start to accept them for who they are. And maybe that's the first thing I had to do.
Absolutely. I wanted to talk a little bit about, in the beginning of the book, you talk about getting to meet the Obamas, and that's lovely. And then eventually you make these 2 trips to visit both Bill Clinton and George W. Bush, and talk about expectation there. It seemed to me in the book that what you expected out of those meetings was kind of the opposite of what you got.
Yeah, really. Actually, the presidents, my expectations of them even kind of changed. So we're in the first trip was to Little Rock, where I started my career. I covered Governor Bill Clinton for years before we both moved to Washington at about the same time. So we're back in Little Rock, and Tyler and I are in the back of a news conference that President Clinton is giving. And that's my home. I've spent years at the back of news conferences. That's what I do for a living. But it's a foreign place for Tyler, and there's all these people and all this noise, and it's not an easy place for an Aspie to be. And he looks up to me and says, "I don't want to do this, Daddy. You interview him." I said, "Well, son, your mom wants you to do this, and you don't have to interview him. It's just a conversation." And he's such a nice man. I promise you this will go well.
Well, and let's back up for just a second, Ron. When you asked for this time, what did you tell these former presidents? Did they know that your son had a diagnosis? Did they know what the hope was? What did they know?
Yeah, I told their staff that we had taken all these other road trips as part of an effort for me to connect with my son and for him to practice his social skills that he was just learning. And this was my wife's idea, and she wanted me to ask if the presidents would meet with me. So they all knew that they were there to have a conversation with Tyler, and like Bill Clinton knew that Tyler's favorite president was Teddy Roosevelt. So Bill Clinton starts right away into talking about Teddy Roosevelt when he sits down with Tyler. And he's going on and on about, it's really fascinating stuff about comparing his time with TR's time and his presidency with TR. And I'm taking notes as a dispassionate observer. I'm not part of the conversation, but I start taking notes because it's really interesting stuff. And I noticed though that at about 40 minutes into it, Tyler has hardly said anything. And I can tell Tyler wants to say something because he's a teenage boy and he's an Aspie and this is his man, this is his topic. And I realized that Bill Clinton is kind of obsessing on a topic, and he's missing social cues. He's not picking up the clues that Tyler's sending up. So I write down in my notebook is BC and Aspie. BC is my initial, obviously, for Bill Clinton. Now, I know Bill Clinton's not an Aspie, right? But the point is, if the most social animal I've ever been around, if even he can miss social clues and even he can obsess on a topic, why am I so bound up in knots over my son's quirkiness, over my son's rough edges? To the point that when we're walking out of the penthouse suite and the president's about to walk us over to the Clinton School, which is next door. So the president's a little bit ahead of us, and I turned to Tyler and said, "What'd you think?" And he said, "Well, he's a nice guy. He likes to talk about himself and his stuff." And of course, I'm laughing. That sounds like one of our boys, right? I said, kind of like you, son?" And he says, "Yeah, kind of like me." So Clinton bonded with him in almost a non-neurotypical way. It was really kind of neat. By the way, he could not have been more gracious. I could tell some stories about how he made Tyler feel comfortable. And then with George Bush, it was almost the exact opposite. We walked in George Bush, and by the way, Tyler immediately struck a posture. He put himself, hands in his lap, legs crossed, in a way that took him a whole hour to get to with Bill Clinton. He started out very nervous with Clinton. I actually watched his body language shift to mirroring after an hour Bill Clinton's. So it was interesting to watch him start with Bush in that pose that he had just learned from Bill Clinton, basically, where he at least looked calm and collected, even though, as you know, he's probably going 1,000 miles in his head. So Bush, anyhow, just starts asking him a bunch of questions, and I compare it to like an oil drill. Boom, you know, what's your favorite topic? Where do you go to school? What's the name of your teacher? Do you like sports? Of course, Tyler says no. What do you want to? What are you going to be doing later on? Do you want to go light? All these questions, and I get nervous because Tyler's given a bunch of 1- and 2-word answers, like our kids do, right? And I'm worried about wasting the president's time, embarrassing myself. So I pop in, I interrupt, and I ask Bush something about a sporting event, something about the Detroit Tigers. We love sports, and we've talked about the Detroit teams. And Bush looks at me like, he didn't say anything, but he just kind of gave me a look like, didn't you just hear your son say he doesn't like sports? You know, would you shut up? I actually wrote in my notebook, shut up. And after he did that to me, shut me down without saying anything, which shows you a lot of high social intelligence. And Bush is actually very good in a room. He then he asked Tyler something like, he didn't ask, what do you want to be when you grow up, which is what a parent would ask. It was something like, what do you see in your future, or something like that. And Tyler said, I want to be a comedian. Well, I'd never heard that before. Now, I never asked the question the right way, and I never really listened, and I didn't spend 15 minutes asking him questions and getting him in a comfortable space. And it was George Bush who kind of got him. For the first time, I was hearing my son talking about his future.
I love your descriptions of both former presidents. People need to read the book. There's so many levels. I love your description of George W. Bush talking to him as though he's drilling and drilling and drilling until he can find the subject that hits paper, which I think so many of us feel sometimes when we're engaged in a conversation with someone who's on the autism spectrum. We're looking for what's the and I love the comparison to it being drilling. So
when you read it, see what he does when he hits pay dirt. It was interesting how he then cultivated that conversation in a way that would not have been intuitive to me. It's worth reading just to see how Bush handled it once he hit on it.
Absolutely. And then what was fascinating to me was that from time to time you shift and talk about other moments or a memory of something with your dad or with your wife. And you talk specifically about 9/11 and about having missed it on 9/11 in terms of being a husband and a dad, which I thought was particularly poignant for anybody who has their own obsession, the thing that they love to do, which clearly you love your work. And then this thing happens, 9/11, and the interaction between you and your wife. And I have to be honest, I had read the part where you had written the question about is BC an ASPE, and then as I was reading your description of 9/11, I have to be honest that I wrote into my Kindle, is this where Ron is a little bit on the spectrum? Because I believe that we're all somewhere.
So do I. Exactly.
And so because the driven way in which you looked at 9/11 and compartmentalized it so that you weren't thinking about what was happening from your wife's perspective, I was like, oh, is that where, and you agree?
Yeah, I'm just starting to realize. I think I got a little OCD, and I'll get fixated on something like this. And you mentioned and I agree with you completely. We're all on the spectrum somewhere. That's the conclusion I make coming out of the Clinton interview. You mentioned the 9/11. Earlier you mentioned, and thank you, that I have a lot of experience doing interviews.
Yes.
The best interview and most important interview I've ever done in my life was one date night. My wife and I, we have a date night every Friday night. I brought a tape recorder when we were starting this project, and I interviewed her for 90 minutes. And it's funny, and you might appreciate this. For some reason, I was able to do it very dispassionately. And I interviewed her just like if she was a public figure. And I followed up with questions and drilled down and got her really to open up. And it didn't really affect me until about 3 months later when I transcribed the tape for the book. And then I literally was crying as I'm transcribing it, because I'm hearing her tell me things that I had never heard before and really didn't even hear when I was interviewing her. And one of them was 9/11, where we're talking about on that day. I was working in the White House, and they evacuated the White House. But I stayed behind for like at least another 90 minutes because I was filing stories to the Associated Press, which, a pretty important news service, and it was a pretty important responsibility I had to the public. But mainly to me, I was competing. I was doing my thing. So stuff kept happening. So I kept filing, and the Secret Service was trying to get me to leave, and I wouldn't leave, and I'm doing my job. And then I'm walking out of I'm walking out of the White House, casually strolling as I'm calling my boss. And Lori sees me on TV and finally realizes that I'm okay because, I forgot, because what had happened was as soon as it had hit, as soon as the second plane hit, Lori calls the White House, calls me at the White House. And I tell her, she says, what's going on? There's something going on. I'm watching TV. I says, honey, they've been hijacked, because I just got off of my source to tell me that the planes have been hijacked, and it was a terrorist strike. And I was in the middle of filing that. I said, honey, they've been hijacked. I got to let you go. And I hung up. I hung up on my wife on 9/11. Now, we had 3 kids in school, so less than 5 miles away. And not only did I hang up on her, but I didn't think about her the rest of the day, because I'm covering this huge historic story, and I wasn't even worried about my safety, I was just, like you say, I was focused on it. And so years later, when we did this interview, the one thing she told me, and I was kind of defending myself, saying, I try to compartmentalize my work from my home life, thinking that was a good thing, that I want to be a good dad, so I compartmentalize. And she said, for years, and 9/11 is the best example, I always wanted to be a part of, I wanted to talk to you about your work, but you never would. It made me feel like I wasn't worth you even talking to, that I was worthless. And so I realized it took doing the book and doing an interview with her to really hear how much I had been hurting her with my obsession, an ASPE word, on my job.
Well,
it's a long answer. I'm sorry.
I think it's an amazing book on so many different levels. I think it's a great read for people who don't have kids who are on the spectrum. It's a slice of history that you get to know these 3 presidents in a different way than you would in any other story. It is an autism story that has not ever been told, obviously, because it's so unique. And from the point of view of the relationship between you and your wife and you and your son, I think it's a wonderful, wonderful resource. And so a great gift to give somebody for Father's Day, but it's equally, I think, an important gift to give to the autism moms so they get a different perspective. I also want to say, too, because we're almost out of time, that you, at the end of the book, you give a series of, I think, some of the best tips that there are for a parent who, for any parent, autism parent or otherwise, about how to get through these years and love your kid for who they are. So we thank you for that. We want to remind everybody that the name of the book is Love That Boy. There's a very specific story that goes with the title of the book. I wish we had time to discuss that. But any parting thoughts, because Father's Day is coming up, anything that you want to say? We got about 1 minute.
Well, I don't know. I guess I'll say quickly that the title comes from George Bush telling me at one point, as Tyler was walking away, love that boy. And you could tell I was anxious about the way Tyler was behaving. And at the time, I thought he was telling me, love that boy despite his quirkiness, despite the fact that he's a little different. And it took me all these years and my wife's prodding to realize, no, that's not the lesson here. For all of our kids, not just special needs kids. The idea is to love that boy because of what makes them different, because of what makes them stand out, because whatever is different about all of our kids is really what makes them special. So that's where we got the title of the book.
A great, great message. Ron, we thank you so much for being here, especially on a day when there's a lot going on politically. That would be a whole other show. We'd love to know what your thoughts are about everything that's been happening even in the last 24 hours. But we're out of time. We thank you so much for your work. We want to encourage people, get this book, Love That Boy, give it as a gift. It's a wonderful, wonderful gift. We'd love to have you back on the show sometime with Tyler. He can try out some of his jokes with us.
Yeah, he hasn't been wanting to do a lot of media, but I bet you he'd be willing to do
Okay,
this. So
ask him. We'd love to have him on the show. We thank you so much, and thank your staff for arranging it so that we could have this time with you. And thank you for hanging with us when we were having technical difficulties. We are unfortunately out of time. We're at the end of the show. I want to remind everyone, no live show tomorrow, no live show next Wednesday. We are back next Thursday, and we have, we're going to demo a new toy, the Lux Blocks. That you've not seen before, and it's going to put the construction toy world on its end. Very cool toy, and we've got some other great guests that will be with us next Thursday. Check out on social media. Until then, we'll be updating you on some of the things that we're doing. In fact, tonight I'm going to see Nancy's son graduate from 8th grade. So check us out on Autism Live on Facebook, on Twitter, and you can also check me out on Facebook as well. I will be back with you next Thursday. Until then, please give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you as well. Bye-bye for now. Is Ron still there? Okay, so I'm talking and can you hear me? Matt, can you hear me?